Good afternoon. I'm Bill Boyle, Director of Employee Health and Fitness for Home Box Office, and I'd like to welcome you to our presentation on mindfulness and introduction. Please join me in welcoming Tara Healey, Program Director of Mindfulness-Based Learning at Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. In addition to holding her master's degree in health education and having 20 years experience in organizational development, Tara is the architect of Harvard Pilgrim's innovative program adapting the principles of mindfulness meditation to a corporate environment. Additionally, Tara has been a featured speaker at numerous conferences, domestic and international. Please welcome Tara.
Thank you for that introduction, Bill, and I'm really delighted to be here with all of you today and to talk about mindfulness, a topic that not all that long ago we probably would not have found in a corporate setting. And I'm really delighted that the science has in fact caught up with the practice, and that's partly what is helping to legitimize the rise in interest and popularity in this particular topic. So let me start by giving you a sense of where we're going. So over our next bit of time together, I want to talk about what mindfulness is, what meditation is, what the benefits of such a practice are, and also to do the practice. So right now there is quite a lot of misconception about what meditation is and about what mindfulness is. So I want to talk about both of those, with mindfulness being the quality of mind or a quality of mind that is awake and aware and alert. And meditation is like the technique or the tool or even the exercise that we use in order to cultivate it. So mindfulness is not relaxation. It's not creating special states of mind. It's not trying to figure something out, and it's not trying to stop thought. And there are more, but these are pretty common. So there are a number of different meditative techniques that would be aimed at relaxation, but mindfulness meditation, relaxation or ease is a byproduct. So it's not the emphasis, the focus, the goal. It's really a byproduct. And we're not trying to create special states. In a sense, what we're doing with this practice is we are turning toward the state we're actually in. I actually want to highlight that last one. And as you can see, I bolded it because so often people would approach me at work and say, I'd really like to do this meditation thing, but I just can't shut this off. And really, the mind produces thought. It's sort of the nature of the mind. So we are not trying to stop thought. And if we approach this practice with that idea, we'll be frustrated every time we sit down and try to meditate. So mindfulness is a practice. It's one of the few things I know of that is simple but not so easy to do. It's a discipline, and it is ultimately about seeing clearly the way things actually are, not how we wish they were or how we think they should be, but it's a way of seeing clearly how things are. So it's a practice and a discipline, so it's very similar to exercise. If you want a strong and flexible body, you pick an exercise and you do it for a certain amount of time so that you are developing strength and flexibility that you can then employ in your life. And that's an example that I think is a good one, and I'll say a little more about it. There are lots of definitions out there, many of them aiming at the same thing, but this one I like a lot, which is mindfulness is a quality of mind that is awake, that is aware, that is alert, and that knows it. So it's kind of like a metacognition. You are now aware of being aware. It's helpful to understand the opposite of that. So have you ever had a moment where you've been lost in thought, and then all of a sudden you go, whoa, where was I? And you, right? And you wake up in a sense, and that's probably the best word. You sort of wake up from what I would call the trance of thought, because thought can keep us almost in a trance-like state. The moment you wake up, you know it. You're awake, you're aware, you're alert, and you're in the driver's seat. What can often happen is that thoughts slip in unnoticed, and then they tend to have a lot of control over us. And with this practice, we are learning to be more in control of our thought process and our thoughts and our actions. It's a way of intentionally paying attention. So if you've ever been in a meeting and somebody calls on you, but you've been planning dinner, you know that you can't really answer that question. And, especially, it's happened to all of us, it's happened to me, but when we're in a setting like this and at work, and the importance of being tuned into that meeting, but the mind naturally has a tendency to wander. And what we're doing is we're strengthening our capacity to be more present wherever we actually are. There are two parts to this definition. So the first part is your quality of mind that is wakeful, that is aware, that is alert, and that knows it. The second part of the definition has to do with sort of what I would call a certain qualifier. And I'm going to illustrate it through a story. George Schaller was a primate biologist, and he was getting a lot of really fabulous data on the primates. And there were many scientists at that time that were studying primates, but they weren't getting what Schaller was getting. And so as you might imagine, they're all saying, like, how is Schaller getting all this great data? He knows about the food they eat. He knows about their family structures, their habits. We're not getting it. There are a couple things. So Schaller did not carry a weapon. The other scientists entered the terrain with fear, with trepidation, with guns, essentially. And what Schaller did is he actually entered the terrain with curiosity, with patience, with receptivity. And this is exactly how we enter the terrain of our own mind and body. So when we engage in these practices in mindfulness meditation, we are learning about ourselves with a kind of open, receptive, curious attention. And when we start to meditate, there are all kinds of things that can come into our awareness. And it's not such an easy practice, and we can be our own harshest critics. So the idea is that we are receiving, we're open and patient. You're really like a reporter. So you are the subject and you are a scientist in a sense, and you are open, curious, receptive without judgment. But our deep conditioning often means that we are lost in thought of the past or the future with a consequent disconnection from our moments. I mean, how many can relate to this slide in some way, that our minds are lost in thought of the past or the future? In fact, there was a really, really well done study done at Harvard by Killingsworth and Gilbert. And what they did is they took a bunch of people and they gave them pagers, and they would periodically page them. And when they would page, they would say, so where are you? Where's your attention? And how do you feel? About 50% of the time, people were mind wandering, and they were not all that happy. So the study, it's called a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. So about 50% of the time, which is pretty astounding. So in some ways in this practice, we're learning to have a little bit better control over our attention so we can aim and direct it at will rather than be hijacked by thought. This is one of my favorite quotes by William James, and he says, "The faculty of voluntarily bringing back a wandering attention over and over again is the very root of judgment, character, and will. An education which would improve this would be an education par excellence." So bringing back a wandering attention over and over is the very root of judgment, character, and will, meaning that this is a practice that helps us align with our deepest values for how we want to be in the world. So if you've ever said something to somebody and you really kind of zung it to them, and then after you're like, oh, why did I do that? The practice helps us really be more aware of that and more in tune with that. I've really separated the benefits out into two different categories. So we have the health and wellness benefits and then the workplace. So here's some of what the science is showing. In terms of health and wellness, immune function, decreased inflammation, just sort of an overall sense of well-being, resilient, and possibly slow the aging process, and specifically in terms of memory. And the work site, productivity, social emotional intelligence, memory, focus, concentration, impulse control. There's a part of the brain related to impulse control that's really significant. And so we kind of can catch ourselves a little bit sooner. And the ability to step into somebody else's shoes and take another person's perspective. There's 4 things that typically have shown to increase our overall sense of well-being and possibly even enhance our longevity. And that has to do with food and nutrition, exercise and fitness, family and social connections, and then finally contemplative practice. I would actually add sleep. I think sleep would be a really good addition to this list that just enhances our overall sense of well-being. And I put mindfulness in the center of that because mindfulness can help inform which of those things we could improve or we're overdoing it with, but it's a way of providing some balance. So I think about mindfulness as really informing our lives. What's my relationship to food? What's my relationship to exercise? How am I doing in the social connection? Am I getting enough or too much? I have received so many questions about multitasking. I thought, it probably warrants saying a little something about it. There are numerous studies that show that multitasking is not that efficient. It's not efficient. In fact, it decreases productivity by as much as 40%. It decreases IQ in men by 10 points and women 8 points. And anything you read about multitasking, and just in terms of the research and the studies, show it's really not, it's counterproductive. So what do we do? And often what I say is maybe there's a way to mindful task, meaning that use this practice of cultivating our capacity to be more awake and aware, to see what we're doing that's simply habit and not needed. So for instance, if you're at work and you're working and your phone rings, but let's say you're not expecting a call, is the habit tendency to go ahead and reach out? And how often are you reaching away from wherever you are? Knowing that there are some times where you have to. So it's not about not doing it at all, but it's really using the practice to see, or what's a great way to is just checking your phone. Like how often are we looking and what's really necessary and what is not necessary. So I want to shift into meditation a little bit now. I like to think of meditation as kind of a fitness routine for the mind. It's sort of like brain fitness. And what we're doing when we practice meditation is we are cultivating or developing the muscle of concentration. And we know now through science that regular bringing our attention back to a particular object is producing structural changes in the brain that really support us. So the idea with meditation is that you want to have an object for your attention to be able to land on because it helps counter the strong forces of distraction in the mind. So if you were just going to sit in meditation without having anything and you've never meditated before, it could be really, really challenging. So the idea is that you want to use either body sensation or breath, and I'm going to take you through practices with both of those. The other reason an object is really useful and helpful is because it helps us see the speed at which the mind is moving. So, if you're sitting on a train and you look out on the horizon, it's really hard to judge the speed of the train. But if you take your gaze inward, you can actually judge the speed of the train a little bit better. And that's also what an object does. So if we have something to focus on, it's going to show us the speed at which our minds are moving. Don't worry about thought, it will happen. You are not trying to stop it. You are just seeing that when you've engaged in it and you see it, you go, you can even label it thinking and then come back to your breath. So there's a couple different ways to practice. One is what I call formal, and that's just sort of like exercise in a sense, where you say, okay, I'm going to give this a try for the next 10 days, and I'm going to practice 10 minutes every morning, or I'm going to practice 10 minutes out of lunch, and I'm going to practice meditation. Informal practice is essentially where you bring your wandering attention to the task at hand. That could be you're in a meeting and you realize you've been planning a vacation, so you just bring your attention back. Or you're waiting in line somewhere and you realize that you're drifting, daydreaming, which is, by the way, just the default mode of the mind. So you see that that's happening, and it's an opportunity to informally just bring your attention back to waiting in line, noticing how your body feels, noticing thought and sensation. So in a sense, what we are doing in meditation is we are aiming and sustaining our attention on a particular object over and over and over again. And by doing that over and over again, we are beginning to sort of, I think of it almost as a calibration. Think of meditation as a way of calibrating or steadying the mind so that you can use it with greater efficacy. So do not worry about the thinking mind. The thinking mind will do its thing. The mind has no pride. It'll, slip right in. You'll catch that you're thinking, release and return. That's formal meditation. And informal is just returning your attention to wherever you are. If you want to have a strong and flexible body, you pick an exercise and you do it for a certain amount of days a week and a certain amount of time on those days. And you are developing strength and flexibility, not just so that you're strong and flexible when you're formally practicing or formally exercising, but you're actually developing what's called abiding traits in your body, so that you go off to the gym or you walk when you get home at night. You develop that strength and flexibility so that you can carry that into the service of your life. So you can lift things, you can take stairs, you can get around, right? Meditation is the same thing, only what we're doing is cultivating our capacity to be more awake and aware. So we set aside time every day, or it doesn't even have to be every day. You could say, 5 days a week. I'm going to practice doing 10 minutes of meditation as a way to just check this out. And you practice not just so that you're awake and aware and mindful during the actual formal practice, but you want to really bring that out into the service of your world. So as William James says, so that we can align with our deepest values, so that when we're driving the car or when we're engaging with others, we're able to bring that kind of wakeful quality as opposed to a habit or conditioning or a pattern. So we put ourselves, in a sense, in the driver's seat. So there was a study done in Boston at Mass General led by Dr. Sarah Lazar, and she took a bunch of people like us in the Boston area and she put them through functional MRI scanner. Then she put them through 8 weeks of meditation training, and then they all went back in the functional MRI scanner. So here is some of what she found. The temporoparietal junction, which is responsible for emotional intelligence, posterior cingulate cortex, impulse control, cerebellum is balance and motor control, and the hippocampus is memory. So all of those structures had what she would call more activity, a little bit more, and so the idea is that you would likely be able to use that part of the brain would sort of step up and be more functional. The other is the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. The prefrontal cortex, which is right behind the forehead, is like the executive function. It's sort of like the CEO of the brain. And it's the part of the brain that says, yes, do this, no, don't do that. Not a good idea, yes, you can go ahead and do that. And the amygdala is the part of the brain associated with fear and stress. The amygdala in her study got a little bit less active, which is what you would want. So slightly less active amygdala, so not quite as a hyper response to stress. And the prefrontal cortex, especially on the left side, had a little bit greater activity. Now the left side of the prefrontal is associated with well-being, more ease of relationships. These two things work hand in hand together, so they kind of have this relationship with one another. And if you've ever seen anybody just have an emotional breakdown where they totally lose it, it's called an amygdala hijack. It means the prefrontal cortex did not really have time to assess that this doesn't warrant a complete emotional breakdown. But the prefrontal holds the circuitry to inhibit it. So the idea is you really want to keep these two things in good working order. And the good news is that meditation has been shown to keep those two structures working well. But when we think about work and what's important, the ability to have concentration, creativity, focus, innovation, and emotional intelligence, those are really, really valuable and important competencies in a work environment. And this is a practice that is creating some space in order for those things to be present. I thought it was helpful to just show you where mindfulness is going in terms of mainstream. So, Aetna, Bose, General Mills, Google, there's just a number of organizations, the World Bank, U.S. Congress, although whenever I show U.S. Congress, everybody's like, it's not working, something's wrong, but it's newly there. And it's, happening in school systems, it's happening in prisons, and it's really making its way into our common culture. So let's go ahead and do a practice. What I'm going to take you through is a very short guided body scan where I'm going to ask you to direct your attention to different parts of your body. It'll be very short. You want to sit in a way that is comfortable and upright, And I emphasize the upright because sleepiness is really tricky and it kind of slips right in. So when you're ready, allow your eyes to close or keep your eyes open, but just gaze down. So either is fine. So if you want to have open eyes, just gaze down. Otherwise, allow the eyes to close. And let's just take a moment to let go of all that has already happened today. And to let go of anticipation of what's next. So bringing the mind and the body together in this moment. And turning the gaze inward and simply noticing what sensations you happen to notice in your own body. What sensations are making themselves known to you? And this would be things like a pulsing, a vibration, the heartbeat, perhaps the points of contact with the body and the surface. It could be temperature. Just taking a moment to let your attention rest on the sensations that are occurring in your body. And I'm now going to ask you to direct your attention to your feet. So bringing attention to both the left and the right feet. In a sense, you're isolating that part of the body in your field of awareness. So bottom of the feet, top of the feet, the ankles, just noticing what is there or not. Lack of sensation is something to know. And bringing awareness to the lower leg, so include the calf and the shin, both the left and the right, and just simply aware of what is present, what sensations are there. Bringing attention to the knees, the top of the knees, the sides and the back of the knee, aware of sensation or lack of sensation. To the hips and thighs, just simply noticing perhaps points of contact or any other sensation that is making itself known to you. Moving awareness now up around the entire torso, so the front of the body and the back of the body, and holding the torso in your awareness and just noticing. What are the sensations that you're aware of? Let your attention land there. Coming up over the neck, bringing the awareness down over the arms and hands, up over the back of the head, the sides of the head, top of the head, and bringing your attention now over your face. And just noticing what's there. And just for a moment, noticing the breath. And so beginning to narrow the attention on the body, breathing in and breathing out. And in a moment, I'll ring a chime. You can track the sound with your attention. So moving attention from the breath to sound. And when you feel ready, allowing the eyes to open. Kind of summarizing, you can think of this quality we're cultivating through meditation as a guardian. It protects us from ourselves, it protects others from us. Mindfulness increases the gap between impulse and action. So the more awake and aware we are, the more we're increasing that gap to say or do something that we wish we didn't say, and we're becoming more aware of the tendency to do it so we can actually choose a more skillful response. So it increases the gap between impulse and action. I recently saw a quote that I really liked where Watson says, "Sherlock, you see everything." And he says, "No, I just notice what I see." So it's that kind of awake, aware quality. I just notice what I see. So mindfulness is literally like a lens. You take the scattered and reactive energy of the mind and focus it into a more coherent source of energy for living, for healing, for problem solving, and for creativity. Couple quick techniques. One is something that I call stop, and it's actually from mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's one of the techniques that they use, and it's really handy. So the more we practice, the more we can call on it, especially if you're triggered by something or someone. Remembering STOP, and the S is just stop or pause. The T is take a breath. The O is just observe your body, which is one of the reasons we do body scan, is just to get the mind and the body in a more connected way. So it's pause, breathe, observe, and let that inform your action. So you're either going to not take an action because that's best in that moment, or you're going to take an action informed by wakefulness. The other is Taken the Good by Dr. Rick Hansen, and I really love this. So he's a neuropsychologist, I think is the correct term, but he's really studying sort of what makes us feel good. And the mind has a negativity bias. He's asking us to pay more attention to that which is good, and even little things like the weather today, the blue sky, the warmth of the sun, and literally savor for 30 seconds and noticing that that's starting to create some changes in brain structure. So it could be the laugh of a child, it could be, something that just feels good. And you hang out with it literally on purpose for about 30 seconds to begin to cultivate some change in the brain. So a few things for getting started. You can download the free 3-minute, 10-minute, or 20-minute at Harvard Pilgrim. So all of those are available. You can take, there's something called Headspace or Get Some Headspace, and it's Take 10, which is 10 days for 10 minutes. It's free and it's fabulous. I love these guys. I also emphasize the empirical nature of this practice. So qualitatively, notice the difference between being lost in thought and waking up. So while I really like the science, I also just want to emphasize that this practice is empirical. Notice when you're lost, notice when you wake up. What's that like? So the other thing is there are some great books. On the Harvard Pilgrim website, there is not a book up there that I have not read or would not recommend. We also have a Facebook page called MindtheMoment. We try to post things that are a little bit unique, a little bit different. So the last thing I'd like to do here is to just direct you to some of our resources. So there's the link to our website and our Facebook page, which is called MindtheMoment. And I want to thank all of you for your attention. Thank you.